Forward button. I don't have it fully up. Oh, it's smart. You can go after the face. They don't have it all extended, so it won't fit on the table. It's better to do it back here than up closer. See people walking around. That's a good point. Likewise, the closer you get, then the more obsolete it is. Yep. You know, my legs are still good. Let's walk over.
So the International Orienteering Federation recognizes kind of four main versions of orienteering. So there's foot orienteering, which is the first thing you saw in the video, is the main form where you're on foot. There's ski-orienteering, which is the winter version on cross-country skis. There's mountain bike orienteering, and there's trail orienteering. The idea of trail orienteering is so that it removes kind of the physical mobility requirement for orienteering. So anyone can do it. The way it's set up is there's various locations. You go out and actually, instead of trying to find the flag, you see several flags out, and the goal is to read the map, interpret the map, and figure out which one of those flags is the one that the map is telling you about. So it emphasizes the map reading aspect. You can have assistance. All the ways to get between the locations are on trails, like paved trails or smooth trails. You can have assistance from getting from one point to the other. The challenge is figuring out the map and interpreting the map. So orienteering really can be done by people at all levels, all abilities, all different basic activities. There's also a lot of different variations of orienteering. So one of the great things I think about this sport is that you can find a variation that you like. So you can, the standard format is a point-to-point format. You can start at the first location, the second location, and so forth. You come back to the finish. There are score formats, so you have a certain time, and you figure out which locations you visit to score as many points as you can. Events can be as short as 10 or 15 minutes, and they can last as long as 24 hours. Good to know that local events, if you go to one of the Rochester Orienteering Club events, half an hour to 2 hours roughly, depending on your course, and how fast you move. So it's not a huge commitment in terms of time. You can go out alone, or you can go out in groups. You can orienteer in the woods, but you can can also do urban orienteering. So Rochester Club has had events around downtown Rochester. You can do this in city parks, on college campuses, lots of different, anywhere you can make a map, you can orienteer. You can do orienteering at night if daytime is too easy, so you go out with a really bright light and look for the flags in the woods. You've already seen the foot and skis, a bunch of mountain bikes. You can also, there's paddle orienteering on canoes and kayaks. People do it on horseback, people do it all sorts of different ways. So anything where you can think of a map and a compass to navigate, you can do a version of orienteering. Why do this? So the video is kind of showing the competitive side of it. So elite athletes or people that are just interested in competitive sports can get into orienteering. The goal is to go as quickly as possible. But you can also be much more casual about it. So you just go out for exercise, you want to have a walk in the woods, you want to just enjoy nature, you want to see more of the local parks, you want to see what's off the trails, because you've never been off the trails. So those are all things that you might want to do. You might also do orienteering to improve map and compass skills, not because you're necessarily going to just orienteer all the time, but you're interested in other activities. Adventure racing is another form of a navigation sport where you're generally covering long distances cross-country in a variety of disciplines. So one race might have on foot and bike and paddling and ropes and all sorts of other things as well. Maybe you're interested in hiking or canoe tripping, backpacking, things like that. Being able to read a map and navigate, even if you're following a trail, knowing where you are so you don't get lost is a useful skill. I actually got started learning navigation in the context of search and rescue. It's important that you don't get lost if you're looking for people who are lost. So there's lots of things like that. So even if you're not just, I want to go out and orienteer because it's fun, as it is, there are other reasons where the map and compass skills in orienteering can be useful. And I put the ... because that's not the whole list. So, and of course the most important reason, it's fun to run around in the beautiful woods. So what do you need to get started orienteering? And basically, this is the most important piece of equipment. You need to show up dressed appropriately for running or walking in the woods. Odds are you're going to get muddy at some point. If you're off trail, you might be going through thorns or bushes and things, so you don't want to wear your favorite piece of most expensive Gore-Tex jacket, but some long pants, sturdy shoes, appropriately warm for the weather is really all that you need. A few other things that are essential but you don't have to show up with. So the map is very important because that tells you where you need to go, but that's provided. So you show up to an event, they hand you a map that shows you where you need to go. Having a compass is very useful, so you can tell which way is north. Having your own is helpful, but in the Rochester Club we have compasses to loan out, so you show up, you can borrow a compass if you don't have one. And then the last bit, the e-punch, which is this little device you put on your finger. The modern technology for orienteering is when you get to one of the checkpoints, you carry around this little finger stick and you stick it in the box and it records a timestamp. The idea is you need to prove that you've been to each of the checkpoints, and the advantage of the technology is it also can tell you how long you took to get to each of them. When you finish your course, you come back and download in a computer and you get all of your results. You know how long it took you to get to each spot. It's very nice for comparing to other people, for figuring out where you messed up or where they messed up. And so, again, these are things people who orienteer a lot often will get their own, but the club has them to borrow, so you can just show up and borrow a compass, borrow an e-punch, get a map at the start, and you're all set to go. So you don't need a lot of equipment. As you get more into it, there's specialized clothing, specialized shoes, a few things, but really nothing particularly fancy. Just showing up and whatever you would go hiking in is fine. What skills do you need? So the idea is that you don't necessarily have these skills when you show up at the beginning. They're things that you learn over the course of getting good at orienteering. So a major important skill is orienting the map. So the idea is your compass is telling you which way is north. Your map is drawn so that north is usually at the top. Orienteering maps are all to magnetic north, so you don't have to worry about declination or anything like that you might be used to if you've used like USGS topo maps. And orienting is just lining up your map so that north in reality is pointing the same way as north on your piece of paper on your map. And it's an easy thing to do. You hold your compass. I have my compass. I just hold my compass in front of me. I hold my map next to the compass. And I rotate my whole body, turning around, until the red end of the needle on the compass is pointing in the same directions as the arrows on the map that say north. And the reason I turn my whole body is because that way, once your map is oriented, forward for you is straight ahead on the map. So you don't have to kind of figure out, okay, it's left on the map, and that means I have to go that way. That's too confusing. At least it's too confusing for me to figure out. So you turn around so that your map is pointing forward on the map is forward the way that you go, left on the map is left for you, all of that is much easier. That's actually kind of the biggest use of the compass, is keeping your map oriented. What else do you need to know? You need to know how to read the map. So one of the nice things about orienteering maps is the symbols, the colors, and everything that are on the map. There's an international standard that defines what these symbols are. So once you learn how to read an orienteering map, say in Rochester, you can go anywhere in the world and understand an orienteering map. So it's all universal or international symbols. So you can't quite read all the details of the legend on the left, but it defines a bunch of the symbols. Colors are used to help separate things. Water features are in blue, earth features like contour lines or earth banks are in brown, man-made features like buildings are in black, also rock features like boulders are in black. And then the color scheme that fills things in tells you how thick the woods are. So the idea is you may be leaving the trail to go off to some point in the middle of the woods. You want to know, is this a nice open field? Is this nice woods with trees and not a lot of undergrowth? Is it really thick? Then I don't want to go through there. So the darker the green, the more you don't want to be there. Green means thick vegetation in the woods. Orienteers like to talk about nice white woods. This isn't some sort of racial statement. It's just the color that's used to denote open woods that you can easily run through if you wished. And yellow indicates open field, so no trees and several shades of yellow. Is it a mowed, like a mowed lawn, or is it more like an overgrown field that there's no trees, but it might be slower to get through? So you can use all this information to help you kind of figure out where you want to go. What else do you need to know? You need to be able to choose a route. So the map shows you the course. So again, these symbols are common symbols. Let's see. So the start is always marked with a triangle. The end is marked with double circles. And the locations that you have to go to are marked with circles. And these are both point-to-point courses, so they're numbered in order and they're connected in the order that you need to go in. You don't need to follow the straight lines. You probably don't want to follow the straight lines. It's just to help you see the order so you know which way to go. So choosing a route, so for example down here you might be at this control and the goal is you need to get here. But looking at the map gives you a bunch of choices. You could go in a straight line. You could follow the trail, and it's hard to tell, but it turns into just kind of an open section, and then another trail that goes that way. You could cut over through an open field to a trail and then follow a trail around here, or you could cut through the woods to the far trail and go in. And those are just a couple of options. What do you pick? Well, some routes are shorter than others, so that might be a good choice. Some routes might climb up over something and come back down, whereas ones that go around maybe are flatter. That might be something you factor in. Some things might go through thick green woods or nice open white woods. That's something to factor in. The goal is you're trying to find the fastest route for you. So you weigh how quickly you travel through different areas. If you're a runner, then it might be worth taking a trail even though it's longer. If you're a walker, you might cut through the woods because you're not going to be much slower through the woods than you would be walking on the trail. So you weigh these different factors to decide your route. The other thing that's important in a route too is you want to be able to follow it correctly, right? It's one thing to pick out a map and say, oh, I'm just going to go like this, it'll be easy. And then you have to actually follow that in real life. So picking a route that's simpler to follow might also be faster, because if you take something that has more chances, it might be harder to follow, you increase your risk of getting lost, and that always takes time. So getting lost is not the fastest route. Here's an example that shows some complex route choices. This is a ski-orienteering map. In ski-orienteering, the primary thing is trails, custom-made trail systems. So the green lines here are denoting groomed ski trails. The wide green lines are big, wide trails that you can use the skate technique on, if you're familiar with cross-country skiing. The dashed green lines, which is the majority of this map, are 1 meter wide trails made by a snowmobile. And then there's occasionally dotted lines that are like snowshoe trails that are even narrower. So the width of the trail is important because most competitors, at least at the higher levels in Ski-O, are using skate skis. The 1 meter trails are not wide enough for that technique, so you're stuck with double poling or something that's a little bit slower and takes a lot more energy. So choosing the width of the trail is important, also whether things go up and down, so the contour features and so forth. And you can see on this map that there's very dense networks. To give you a sense of scale, this distance between the vertical lines is 250 meters. So for something like this, to go from number 2 to number 3, it's 250 meters in a straight line, and you're going through, what, 7 trail junctions? So imagine how fast you ski. That's, less than a minute, per trail junction. Trying not to get lost in that is very challenging. This was from the World Championships over last month, so this is a top-level ski orienteering map. Local ski orienteering, use places like Mendon Ponds. We don't have quite this many trails, so it's a little bit simpler. But the idea is still route choice, figuring out how to get from one point to another, and then actually following that route. So once you've picked a route, you have to be able to kind of match what you're seeing to the map so that you can follow the route. So interpreting the map is important. Contour lines are one major feature on the map. So again, if you've worked with topo maps, you might be familiar with this. The idea is what kind of shape on the map translates to what kind of shape in reality as you see it. So for example, number 1 here, which of these is that going to look like if you saw it? I hear a bunch of people saying B. So F is a possibility, but what clues us into B is that we've got a little bump up here. Yeah, so that's that one. What about number 2? Yeah, we got the peak down in the middle, so something like that, and so forth. So being able to look at the map and kind of translate the contour lines into the shape of land that you're going to see. Are you going uphill or downhill? Is it sloping one direction or another direction? Those kinds of things. Other kinds of things, so this is borrowed from something Linda did a while back. So it's not just contour lines, there's other features and things on the map. So this map is from Spencerport. It's a little hard to read the map itself, but this is a photo orienteering course, which gives you some of the idea of kind of interpreting maps. So this is a photograph of a flag hung. There's a clue that tells you it's on a fence, which we could probably tell from a picture. It's on the southeast corner of the fence. And in this case, it tells you what angle the viewer who was taking the picture was looking when they took this. And the idea is, well, where on this map is this? Trying to figure out where this feature is. So we'd have to look for places where there are fences, and it's hard to read, but there's a fence around here, there's some fences up here. So you locate where the different fences are, and then what we're looking for is something where there's a southeast corner. And 95 degrees, I'm looking kind of east-ish when I take the picture. So we would look for how things line up on the map. So we've got north here, so I'm looking kind of in this direction, and I'm looking for a southeast corner, maybe a corner like this, for example, or a corner like this. And we can use other features. We've got forest behind here. We can actually see a house in the distance. So that might give us some clues as well. If maybe an open area, looking at the forest with a house in the distance, you can think about scale. Does that seem the right distance? Maybe here, I'm standing looking through the forest. That's a little bit closer. Reading the features on the map and thinking about what they look like in reality so that you can match up what your plan is with what you're actually doing. Here's an example of flags hard to see. It's on a swamp and stream intersection. We have a boardwalk. So you can look through the places where there's boardwalks. Again, it's a little easier on the actual map. Think about what direction you're looking in and looking for places to try and identify where that might be. So reading all the different symbols, reading thickness of vegetation, reading contour lines, thinking about what that on the map means in reality, and what you're seeing on reality, what that might look like in the map, so you keep track of where you are. Here's a version from a Trello kind of thing. So the idea in Trello is you have a bunch of flags. A is here, B is here, C, D, and E. So there's 5 flags. And you get a chunk of map and a circle on the map, and you get a clue that tells you there's 5 flags. And then these are international standard symbols that describe a little more detail about the control. So this is saying it's the western tree, but it's on the east side of the western tree. So there's some circles on the map that indicate the tree that you can't quite see, and the goal is to try to figure out which of these 5 flags would be on the eastern side of the western tree. Even without reading the map too carefully, I can see 2 trees. This is probably the western one, and then that would be the eastern side, so I would pick that flag in this case. So this was kind of the sort of thing that you'd have in Trello. In Trello, it's a little easier in the picture. You'd be allowed to walk back and forth to try to line things up, but trying to interpret what the map says and match it to reality. This describes a couple of other different locations from the same set of flags to pick things out there. The international symbols, so these are nice because, again, you can go anywhere in the world that use the same symbols, so you don't have to worry if you don't understand the language of whatever country you're orienteering in, you can still read the clues. For introductory and more beginner level, we can give you words, so you don't have to memorize the symbols right away. So I want to demonstrate again with another video that illustrates kind of putting all these together doing an orienteering course. So this video was done by an orienteer named Rebecca Jensen, who lives in the Seattle area. She does orienteering, was actually on the U.S. mountain bike orienteering team last year to the World Champs. And what this does is it basically follows her around part of a course, and she talks about some of the things that go on during the course.
Start punch, and step one, I flip over my map so that north is facing the right way, and I look for the start triangle, which is where I am at, and then the circle for control number one. Now I'm choosing my route, and I'm ready to go. I like to take a conservative route for the first control, because when I start, I'm always very excitable. It's easier to make mistakes. I don't have a sense of the scale of the map yet. So instead of threading through the buildings to the left and making more navigational decisions, I decided just to stick to the pavement on the right and hit the control that way. One of the most common mistakes I make on the first control is to start looking too early. So even though I know I need to run halfway down the parking lot before turning left onto the trail and looking for depression, I think I see something out of the corner of my eye that might be the trail, might be the depression, and against my good judgment, I just have to go check it out. And of course, I don't find the control there, but instead of panicking and just running around looking for the control, I stop and check the map again and look for a feature that I could be on. Control 2 is tricky because the trail is super faint and overgrown in places, as is indicated on the map, which shows the black dotted lines of the trail spaced really far apart. So instead of relying solely on the trail, I paid special attention to the contour lines and could see that I had to go downhill a ways before climbing back out. I also paid close attention to my compass to make sure my map was perfectly oriented. That way, I could check that I was at least traveling the right direction. As I get closer to the control, I can see that it's going to be on a fence. So I take special care to double check the control description to see what side of the fence the control is going to be on. So now that I'm confident that I'm not going to get stuck on the wrong side of the fence, I make a run for it. Running to control number 3, I tried to pick a route that was both somewhat direct but also navigationally simple. However, this time I actually neglected to look at the contour lines. I should have turned left earlier, not only to cut off some distance, but also to cut off some elevation. Control number 4, I ran just a little too fast to see that there was a small but much more direct trail leading up to the control. And as a result, I had to do some tall grass running toward the end of the leg to make up for my mistake. Control 5 is mostly a running leg to get you on the other side of the course. So I took the extra time and brain space to look ahead on the map and make sure I could exit the control quickly. first thing we had to do was get out of the dense maze of trails and forest. To confirm where I was when I popped out of the woods, I looked for 2 fenced-in areas. Unfortunately, I misread the map a little bit and mistook number 6 for number 9. Once I figured that out, I shot straight for the road. And since the control was on an obvious building, I had some brain space to plan out the next control as well. Control number 10, I lost some time at the very end. I spent too much time wandering around the white part of the map, which is open forest, instead of zeroing in on the vegetation boundary between the forest and the open grass. Control number 11, I was facing a big expanse of tall grass with a cobweb of small trails strewn all over it. After following the trails for a little while, I decided it would be a better idea to look for some tall trees on the other side and just run for it. When to stop running along the main trail. One method is to count the trails that you see to your left and to your right, but the trails were somewhat indistinct, so instead of counting trails, I realized that I could look up the hill to the water tower and line myself up with that. My last little blooper was on control 15, which was on top of a knoll. When I got there, I saw someone on top of the knoll and thought, oh, I should go up there too. And then I remembered that my control description said north side. And sure enough, there it was.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you some idea of some of the things that you're looking for, planning routes, things that you might take into consideration to figure out where you're going. The fact that people make mistakes, things don't always go right, so relocating, figuring out what happened, how to get back on track is a very important and unfortunately sometimes too often practiced skill, but very useful. So to kind of to wrap up a little bit, so if you want to learn more, I haven't told you a whole lot about actually doing it, but if you want to learn more and try it out, put in a plug for a week from Saturday. There's a clinic that the Rochester Orienteering Club is doing at Fleet Feet over by Cobbs Hill Park, geared towards, it's meant for as an introduction to orienteering for people who are new to it. It's free. It's at 9, starts at 9 a.m. It includes both stuff indoors, going over some of the skills, map readings, things like that, and also a chance to go out outdoors at Cobbs Hill and try things out. So that's a great place to try things out. You can also come to events that Rochester Orienteering Club is putting on. There's always beginner instruction available at the beginning, and I think there's plans to do a workshop or two geared towards kind of a little bit beyond beginner, towards intermediate level orienteers at some of the events events this spring. The website is there. If you Google Rochester Orienteering Club, that's a way to find it. There's also a group on Meetup, which has announcements and things about the events. And there's also a little display over in the corner, which includes schedules. So if you want to see the schedule of events for this year, that's there. And of course, once you learn more, you're going to want to go out and try it, or maybe you want to go out and try it right now. So again, Rochester Orienteering Club has events all year round. Just kind of wrapped up the ski orienteering season. The first event of the spring is April 18th at Black Creek. That will be a regular event, which means it's point-to-point courses, and there'll be a range of courses from shorter introductory courses that are primarily on trails or all on trails, up to longer, more advanced courses which take you more into the woods, so you can choose a level and work your way up as you gain more experience. And as I mentioned, the schedules are available. There's a lot of different events, but there's a variety of different kinds of events. So these regular events are the one where there's a selection of courses. There's also trail challenge events. These are geared more towards runners, so the navigation is fairly simple, but it's a longer course, largely trail-based. Again, you're welcome to walk the course. There's usually a shorter version, so you don't have to be a fast runner. The Rochester Map Adventure is happening again this year. This is a several-hour event, I think 3 or 5 hours on foot or bike around downtown Rochester. It's a little bit different because there's no orange and white flags to find. Instead, you have locations marked on the map and you have clues that give you something a little more specific and you have to answer. So it can be trivia questions, finding out some piece of information that's on a historical sign, maybe it's some strange object that somebody has in their front yard, things like that. It's a great way to see the city and practice navigating and trying things out and learning all sorts of things about Rochester in the process. In the summer, I tend to do more sprint events, which suggest you have to run really fast. You can, but you don't have to. Primarily, it means they're short events with lots of route choice and lots of quick going back and forth, short legs, lots of checkpoints. Score events also happen in the summer, typically an hour or so, where you have different point values, and the challenge is to visit what you want to get as many points as you can. Also planning a row game this year. It's a longer event. I think the idea is to have like 8 or so hours during the day and 4 to 6 hours at night. This can be a team thing or an individual thing, so if you want to cover more distance, that's an opportunity to do that. There's a night-o in the fall. Always fun to go out in the dark. And next winter, again, there'll be more ski-os. Sometimes there's also things like canoe-os on the schedule, not this year, but other years have had those. So that's hopefully gotten you a little bit inspired to check out orienteering. As I mentioned, there's schedules over by the display. There's whistles with the website on it, if you feel free to take a whistle. And there's also some handouts with a little bit of basic information about getting started with orienteering and some copies of the newsletter, and it looks like some copies of Orienteering North America, which is the sort of National Federation's magazine, so feel free to take those things. The other thing that you can do if you're just dying to go out and start orienteering right now and you don't want to wait until a week from Saturday or April 18th is there are permanent courses set up at Durand Eastland, I think, is available now, Webster Park, Mendon Ponds, and Letchworth. These maps you can purchase. They're $7 tonight. The price will go up to $8 tomorrow. But you can get these maps, and there's locations, posts that are out marked in the parks, and you can go out and do these anytime you want. So you can show up, go out and find some checkpoints. There's easier checkpoints and harder checkpoints on each map. And I think when you finish it, you can send in and get a free entry to Rochester Club events. So that's a great way to go out and casually try it out anytime you want. So on that note, I'll wind up. And any questions or anybody wants to chat about orienteering?